Dear Ulf, me too, I want to congratulate you to a very successful Swedish presidency. Thanks to your leadership, thanks to the very hard work of your team, amazing and fantastic results. So really many, many thanks for the excellent cooperation that we have experienced over the last 6 months. We had also a very packed agenda indeed in this European Council, and I want on one hand to pay tribute on the whole presidency and include in this our Council, EU Council's discussion. First on Ukraine, Ulf, your presidency was crucial to help maintain Europe's ironclad unity in support of Ukraine. We've seen over the weekend the mutiny of the Wagner Group and the obvious cracks that have appeared in Putin's system. So now it's the time to really double down on our support for Ukraine. And this was discussed today in many different topics. For example, on the military side, under your presidency, the member states agreed to use 2 billion euros from the European Peace Facility to procure ammunition for Ukraine. We have already delivered over 220,000 ammunition rounds and over 2,000 missiles, and we are now well on track to deliver the 1 million rounds which are foreseen within the next 12 months. Also, by the end of the year, we will have trained more than 30,000 Ukrainian servicemen and servicewomen. Right now, we have already reached 24,000, so we are overachieving what the deliverable of the goal is concerned. All this thanks to the support of your presidency. On the financial side, all told, now almost 500 days into this atrocious war that Russia unleashed, we have mobilized 70 billion euros for Ukraine since the beginning of the war. And last week, we have disbursed 9 billion euros of our 18 billion MFA package. That is the MFA for the whole of the year 2023. We have, as you know, also made progress on sanctioning Russia. Last week, we adopted the 11th package of sanctions that is basically targeting loopholes and circumvention of sanctions. We have made solid progress on accountability, on our work to bring Russia's crime to justice. In your presidency, I want to thank you for your support in setting up the International Center for the Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression against Ukraine. And during this European Council, we have discussed the topic of immobilized Russian assets. We, the Commission, will come forward with a proposal, and we will focus prudently on the windfall profits from the immobilized assets of the Russian Central Bank. Ulf, your presidency has also been extremely active on the legislative front, and this is a lot of work behind it. You committed to brokering agreements on major outstanding files. I remember that when we started the presidency in Kiruna, and you did so. I counted that under your presidency, more than 27 political agreements were reached, as well as over 30 general approaches from Council. And thanks to this work, we were able to finish negotiations on the Fit for 55 package. It's the heart of the European Green Deal. It's a centerpiece of the European Green Deal. Many thanks for this major achievement. On the digital transition, you brokered an agreement on one of the cornerstones of our Digital Europe roadmap. That is the famous CHIPS Act. And your presidency is ending in style with a key political agreement reached on Tuesday on the Data Act. I also want to thank you for making Europe's competitiveness and Europe's attractiveness, economic attractiveness, one of the governing dominant themes of your presidency. It was a timely decision. It sent a strong signal to our industry in the middle of a fierce global tech race. We've been very successful, for example, in your presidency in reducing one of the main obstacles, that is the energy prices. It's an essential factor for our competitiveness here in the European Union. Just let me give you two figures. The wholesale electricity prices are now 80% lower than at their peak in August last year. and the wholesale gas prices are even 90% lower than August last year. This is a collective European achievement, but it is built on many concerted action. Of course, our competitiveness is much more than only energy. I remember that we had very intensive exchanges with business leaders of the European industry, and indeed this was very valuable input to the Green Deal industrial plan, our to-do list, if I may call it that way. It is deepening our trade and investment ties to global partners, reskilling, upskilling our workforce, a crucial task, fostering investments in strategic technologies. We've discussed it in our Green Deal industrial plan. Of course, the emphasis on creating finally a fully fledged capital markets union was also repeated many times today, the commitment in the European Council, and reducing the reporting obligations on companies. These are just some examples in the vast agenda that we have, which we are working on, of course, also in the next weeks and months to come. This brings me to the topic China. There is a broad consensus, both among leaders here and also with our partners in the G7, on the concept of de-risking, not decoupling. It would not be in our interest in any case to decouple in view of the common global challenges that we need to tackle and our deep economic ties, so we need to de-risk. And we need to de-risk economically as well as diplomatically. Economically, that means reducing our vulnerabilities in our economic relationship. That has been the core of the discussion today about China. Let me give you some examples. First, for example, in trade, we need to address some critical, long-lasting imbalances. I'll give you two figures. Over the last 10 years, the European Union's trade deficit has more than tripled. So today it reaches almost 400 billion euros, and this is simply not sustainable. Or a second example, the environment our businesses operate in. Too often they are faced with unfair practices and hurdles that impede their access to the Chinese market, while in the contrary to the level playing, this is contrary to the level playing field that Chinese companies are benefiting from in our single market. So I hope that the resumption of the EU-China high-level economic and trade dialogue can help address this. A third element, besides these trade issues, are very specific risks we've discussed today too. For example, linked to critical dependencies. We know the high dependency on critical raw materials and rare earth, for example, or the vulnerabilities of our supply chains, or the risks are linked to potential leakage of sensitive technologies. All this has to be taken into account when we speak about de-risking, not decoupling. Diplomatic de-risking is also important because we want to keep open communication lines with China on issues where we agree, but of course also on issues where we disagree, because this prevents misunderstandings. On issues which we disagree, we have to be very clear. It was mentioned Russia's war of aggression on Ukraine and China's responsibility as a member of the UN Security Council is crucial to uphold the values of the UN Charter and has to be addressed by us. All in all, this means continued engagement with China, but following a European approach that is based on our interests and on our values. Finally, let me emphasize the excellent work, Ulf, that the Swedish presidency did on the migration file. Migration is a common challenge that requires a European response. The general position reached by the Council on the Pact on Migration and Asylum is a watershed moment. Many thanks for the intensive work that has been done here. And we can now take it forward with the European Parliament, and of course we count on the Spanish presidency to bring it to a successful close. You know that this is the legal process. In parallel, we are working on an operational tasks. I have summarized in a letter to the European Council all the different steps that we have been taken taking since the last European Council. Let me highlight only a few aspects. Centerpiece is that we have to crack down on criminal networks of smugglers and traffickers that exploit human despair. And we should develop alternative pathways to help people come to the European Union on safe ways, because that breaks the business model of the smugglers and the traffickers. For this approach with third countries, we need a new comprehensive approach with the packages that we are able to offer to these countries to work together. And this goes from investment, for example, into renewable energies, often countries with an abundance of resources for renewable energies, to investment in skillings or education or people-to-people contact. At the same time, we aim to step up the cooperation with those countries against migrant smuggling, work on returns, but also have a clear concept on support of talent partnerships, so the legal pathways to Europe. The second element is that we highlighted in a different context our concerted outreach to partners, for example, as we did it with the Western Balkans. They have taken major steps in the last month, thanks to your presidency, to align their visa policy with that of the European Union. And as a result, we see very clearly that since the start of this year, we have seen a reduction of 25% of irregular movements from that region, mainly because of the alignment of the visa policy. Finally, the third element I want to highlight is the strengthening of the external borders and the improvement of the efficiency of the border management, the procedures at the border. Here we have two pilot projects that are set up in Bulgaria and Romania with the support of the Commission, but also Frontex, Europol and the Asylum Agency. They are now up and running, and I hope that these pilots will serve as a best practice to other borders, external borders for the European Union. Again, Ulf, many, many thanks. This was only a part from the vast achievements of your presidency. Thank you very much for the excellent cooperation.
Thank you, Madam President. Prime Minister, you have the floor.